The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but at one quiet corner stood a girl who never quite fit into the noise. Her name was Lila, a shy waitress with soft brown eyes and a voice so gentle that even her "thank you" seemed to disappear before reaching anyone's ears. Most customers barely noticed her, except one evening, when fate decided to make her impossible to forget. It started with an accident. A glass slipped from her trembling hand and shattered on the marble floor. The restaurant went silent for a moment, then came a cold, commanding voice. "Careful," said Ethan Moreau, the billionaire heir who rarely appeared in public. Everyone knew him. The stoic businessman who had built an empire from his late father's name, known for his perfectionism and rumored arrogance. Lila froze, expecting to be fired on the spot. But instead, Ethan's eyes followed her, not with anger, but curiosity. Because when she bent to pick up the glass, she did something no one expected. She began signing, apologizing in sign language. For a second, Ethan couldn't move. The simple, graceful motions of her hands brought back memories he had buried for years, the silent world of his mother, Claire, who had lost her hearing decades ago. Very few people ever tried to speak to her properly. Most pitied her, others ignored her. But here was this shy waitress, signing, not out of pity, but out of care. Later that night, after the restaurant had closed, Ethan asked the manager about her. "That girl, the one with the tray. Lila, right?" The manager nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. She's new, keeps to herself, quiet but works hard." Ethan hesitated before saying, "Invite her to my mother's charity dinner tomorrow. She'll be serving there." It was an odd request, but the manager obeyed. When Lila found out, her heart almost stopped. A billionaire's private dinner? She'd never even been in a room with such people, let alone served them. But she needed the extra pay, her father's medical bills were piling up, and she couldn't say no. So, the next night, she arrived in her neatest uniform, her hands trembling as she carried trays through glittering chandeliers and elegant laughter. Then came Claire Moreau, the billionaire's mother. Graceful, silver-haired, and surrounded by people who spoke around her, not to her. Ethan watched as Lila approached the table, hesitant but kind. When Claire tried to thank her, the older woman's lips moved, but no sound came out, only the soft smile of someone used to not being understood. Until Lila signed back, "Thank you for having me here tonight." Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. The entire table fell silent. Ethan froze, watching his mother's face light up in pure joy. For the first time that night, Claire laughed, a soundless, radiant laugh that came straight from her heart. She signed back quickly, her hands trembling with excitement. "You know sign language?" Lila nodded shyly. "My brother was born deaf. I learned for him." Ethan didn't say a word. He just watched, as his mother, who had spent years surrounded by people yet living in silence, suddenly had a real conversation. With a waitress. That night, Claire refused to let Lila leave early. They spent hours talking in signs, sharing stories no one else could understand. Ethan sat across the room, trying to ignore the strange warmth growing in his chest. When the dinner ended, his mother said something that changed everything. "Ethan," she signed, smiling, "I want her to work with me." Lila thought she'd misread. "With you?" Claire nodded. "As my interpreter. My friend." Ethan hesitated. "Mother, she's a waitress, not." Claire cut him off with a look. "Not what? Worthy?" He had no answer. And so, Lila's life changed overnight. She went from serving tables to accompanying one of the wealthiest women in the city. She sat beside Claire during meetings, helped her communicate with charity partners, and quickly became the woman's most trusted companion. For the first time in years, Claire was laughing again, and the reason had nothing to do with wealth. But not everyone was happy. Some of Ethan's associates whispered behind his back. "He's letting a waitress into their circle? What's next? He'll marry her." They sneered, calling her a project or a charity case. Lila heard every word but stayed silent. She had faced worse in life, poverty, loneliness, rejection, but the one thing she couldn't bear was feeling unwanted. Ethan, meanwhile, struggled with feelings he didn't understand. Watching her sign, seeing how his mother's eyes lit up whenever she entered the room, made something inside him shift. Lila was quiet, but her presence was powerful. She had touched his mother's heart in a way no one ever could, and slowly, she was doing the same to his. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, during a charity event, a journalist mocked Claire for attending despite her disability. "How inspiring," he said condescendingly, "that you still try." Lila saw Claire's hands tremble, the light fade from her smile. Before Ethan could react, Lila stepped forward. She signed, fiercely. "She doesn't try. She lives. She leads. And she inspires people like me, who came from nothing, to keep going." Then she translated out loud so everyone could hear. The room fell silent. Claire reached out, tears glistening in her eyes. Ethan stared at Lila, realizing this quiet girl had more strength than anyone he'd ever met. Later that night, as the guests left and the lights dimmed, Claire held Ethan's hand. "She's the one who hears me," she signed. Not with her ears, but with her heart. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He went out to the balcony, where he found Lila sitting under the stars, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You didn't have to defend her like that," he said softly. Lila smiled. She didn't deserve to be silenced. "No one does." He hesitated, then whispered, "You're the first person who's ever really listened to her." "And you?" she asked quietly. "Do you ever feel like no one listens to you either?" Ethan looked away. "More than you think." For a long moment, they said nothing, only the night breeze carried their silence. And then, without meaning to, Ethan smiled. A real smile, small, unsure, but honest. In the months that followed, Lila continued to work with Claire, and her bond with Ethan grew deeper. They laughed more, spoke less, and somehow understood each other perfectly, even without words. But the world soon tested them. One evening, a scandal broke, photos of Lila with Ethan's mother, twisted by tabloids into lies. "Billionaire's new gold digger assistant," the headlines screamed. Lila wanted to quit immediately. "I don't want to bring shame to your family," she cried. But Ethan stopped her. "You brought light to it." He stood in front of the press the next morning and said the words that silenced every rumor. "She's not my employee. She's the woman who gave my mother back her voice." His mother's eyes filled with tears. Lila stood frozen, unable to speak, as Ethan turned to her and signed something she'd never expected. "I love you." The crowd gasped, not because a billionaire said those words, but because he signed them. Perfectly, clearly, slowly. Claire smiled from her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. Lila covered her mouth, trembling, before signing back, "I love you too." And in that moment, in a world full of noise, fame, and judgment, two souls found their silence together. Because sometimes, love doesn't need words. It just needs someone who knows how to listen.